Rabbi Schneider is one of the great Rabbanim, Rosh Yeshiva in America. And in one of his books, he has a section which he calls Imponderables. Questions he has. So he has imponderables about Shabbos, imponderables about weddings. So I'd like to share with you one of my imponderables. It's not quite on the level of his, but I'll just share with you mine. Why is today called a fast day? Fast day, time moves so slow. It's so slow, we're just like dragging it out. That's my big imponderable. Now I know there's like an etymology answer to this question, different centuries about what fast means, but that was always what I was bothered by. I just have to share. They say, what is it? Time in school, maybe time sitting in a shmuze, is like a bad joke. It starts slow, it gets awkward, and then you just wait for the punchline so you can get away from it as quickly as possible. Like that's kind of what I feel like our approach to fast days is. We're just grinding it out. Let's wait out the clock. What time is it? It says 5:14, but is it 5:13 and 58 seconds? And they round it up. We're kind of just waiting it out, dragging it out. And that's certainly not what a fast day is. If you look at the Rambam writes, Yesh Sham Yom Shekol Yisrael Misanim Bahem. There are days which Klal Yisrael fasts. Why do we fast? Mipnei Atzar She'iru Bahem. Because of historical tragedies which occurred. But, says the Rambam, why are we fasting? Just because something happened once? So says the Rambam, to awaken within us, to inspire us to tshuva. And that should remind us of the fact that we've had misdeeds. And the fact that our ancestors had similar misdeeds until they had those tragedies and we experienced those tragedies. So it's not exactly a day to just kind of grind it out and wait it out, says the Rambam. There's a well-known comment of the Yerushalmi, where the Yerushalmi says that any generation in which the Beis Hamikdash is not rebuilt, on a certain level it's considered as if the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. That was the cause of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now historically, Asara b'Teves marks the beginning of the siege of Yerushalayim by Nebuchadnezzar, ultimately culminating in the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. Now, if we put the Yerushalmi generation that doesn't have rebuilt the Beis Hamikdash, it's as if it's destroyed it, coupled with the Rambam, well then we can understand a well-known comment of the Chassan Sofer. Chassan Sofer says that Tisha B'Av this coming year might be let's call it regular Tisha B'Av, a day of mourning. It might be a tremendous simcha. What does it depend on, says the Chassan Sofer? What happens today? Because today is the beginning of whatever culminated and ended on Tisha B'Av. So, we have the ability today to change Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av could be a simcha based on what we do today. So again, not really a day to sleep it off. No pressure or anything, but Tisha B'Av rests on you today. Our schoolmakers mentioned a couple times over the last few days that if you look in Shulchan Aruch, you'll find that the minhag of tzaddikim was to fast not only the 10th of Teves, but the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of Teves. Now they wouldn't fast 3 days straight, they would eat at night. What are they doing that for? So if you look in Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch says that on the 8th of Teves, Nichtava Torah Yavanis, the Torah was written, translated into Greek, Bimei Talmei Melech, the Greek Egyptian king, and then darkness descended into the world for 3 days. The 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of Teves are days of darkness. That's the story that some of us learn together in Masechus Megillah, Septuagint. Talmei HaMelech gathers 70 Zakanim, puts them in 70 rooms, tells them to translate, and miracle of miracles, they all translated into the same thing. What they point out, that the bigger miracle would have been if they were in one room and they all would have agreed on the same translation, but okay, fine. So that's the 8th of Teves. What's the 9th of Teves? So if you look at Mishnah Berurah, the Mishnah Berurah says 9th of Teves is the Yartzeit of Ezra Sofer. That's what we said this morning, if anyone was paying attention, during Slichos. I'm not going to test anyone on that. But we talk about it in the Ashkenazim at least. The Sfardim have a different Slichos, I believe. But Ashkenazi Slichos, the first Slicha which is unique to Asara b'Teves, we talk about the 3 tragedies. B'shalosh makos b'chodesh hazeh hikani. I was struck 3 times. What are the 3? So we talk about on the 8th of Teves, 8th of Tevis, Melech Yavan, Insani Lichtov Das Yavanis, he forced us to translate the Torah into Greek. On the 9th of Tevis, Tarov Ba Hanosin Imam Shefer, Ezra Sofer, who was the giver of the Torah, well, we can talk more about that, he was snatched away from us. And on the 10th of Tevis, the siege of Yerushalayim. So, it seems that the way we practice, most of us did not fast the last 3 days, so we kind of just take what was the 8th of Tevis, what happened on the 9th of Tevis, and we kind of push it all into the 10th of Tevis. So, why is that? Is that simply because, well, realistically, we're not fasting? None of us, how many of us said the slichos or understood the slichos this morning? So we're going to say slichos for 3 days? That's just a waste of time. So fine, we'll just put it all there. One day you don't understand slichos. Or, and this is what I would argue, that there's a unifying thread between these 3 days. We're not just happen to say, oh, there's this happened and this happened and this happened 3 times, a hat trick, so we might as well, put it all together. There's some unifying thread about this. Now, in order to maybe understand that, or at least come to a suggestion, I'd like to pose a few more questions. Let's start with Ezra. So I told you what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says that the 9th of Tevis is when is Ezra's Yartzeit. But if you look in Shulchan Aruch, that's not what Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch says, what's the 9th of Tevis? U'b'tisha b'av lo noda ezehi etzara she'er bo. We don't know. I don't know what happened. So, that's odd. But what's especially odd is if you go with the Mishnah Berurah. If you just learn Shulchan Aruch in isolation, that's not necessarily a problem. The Shulchan Aruch we would just say, Shulchan Aruch's a follower. He doesn't know why he's doing this, but he just wrote it down. He recorded history that everyone else was doing. But once you come to the Mishnah Berurah, so the Mishnah Berurah has told us, well, we know what that is. We know the 9th of Tevis is the Yartzeit of Ezra. Why didn't the Shulchan Aruch write it? Why does the Shulchan Aruch, oh, we don't know. Yes, he knows. That's one question. Another question about Ezra, which our schoolmaker raised yesterday after Mincha. Chazal tell us that tzaddikim are born and die on the same day. And the Gemara tells us in Megillah, some of us have learned this, are learning this, that Moshe Rabbeinu's Yartzeit and birthday, Zayin Adar, was what helped to combat the Gzeira of Haman in the story of Purim. Well, if that's the case, said our schoolmaker, why is it that we're mourning over Ezra's Yartzeit? We have sometimes Lag Boimer, Rosh Hashanah's Yartzeit. It's a big party. Why are we mourning over the fact of the death of the tzaddik? That's not what we do. We mark it maybe, but why is it day of mourning that we're saying a slicha about it? And a third question, which we couldn't go through Asara B'Tevis without mentioning this. There's a well-known comment of the Abu Dram, one of the early Mefarshim on the Siddur. Abu Dram says, this can't happen just the way our calendar works out, but says the Abu Dram, were it to be that Asara B'Tevis would fall out on Shabbos, we would fast on Shabbos. Unlike other fast days, except with the exception of Yom Kippur, but other fast days which commemorate the destruction of Beis Hamikdash, even Tisha B'Av falls out of Shabbos, we push it off to Sunday. Now it happens to be, it doesn't work out on the calendar ever like this, but the question is why? And I would ask maybe a more pointed question. Contrast Tisha B'Av to Asara B'Tevis. Tisha B'Av is the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That one, not so strong, that doesn't push off Shabbos. But Asara B'Tevis, the beginning, 3.5 years later, that's so strong, it pushes off Shabbos. Why? So those are 3 questions. 2 questions about Ezra. Why does the Shulchan Aruch not tell us if it knows according to Mishnah Berurah? Your schoolmaker's question, why are we mourning over the Yartzeit of Ezra? We don't seem to normally do that. And number 3, why should it be that Asara B'Tevis falls out on Shabbos, whereas Tisha B'Av would not? So, I once saw a piece from Tzika Reisman. I don't know if anyone knows Tzika Reisman. Tzika Reisman is a great person to be aware of. Tzika Reisman is a fantastically successful businessman. He's Israeli originally, lives in LA, and he also has written tens and tens of svarim on halacha, on lamdus, on machshava, beautiful svarim. So, the kernel of this idea, I think, came from Tzika Reisman. He said that what was Ezra's greatness? Ezra, Chazal tells us, could have been the Nosein Torah. Ezra could have been the one that gave us the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu just beat him to the punch. But Ezra is that level. Some of us discussed in learning Masechtas Megillah, the Ksav, the script that we have in the Sefer Torah, Ksav assures, that's from Ezra. That's really significant. So what was Ezra's historical job? Ezra was supposed to lead the charge back from the Golus of the first Beis Hamikdash, destruction, come back, build up Israel, Beis Hamikdash, etc. However, the Gemara describes that he wasn't so successful because not everyone came back with him. People who had a cushy life in Chutz La'aretz, they kind of stayed in Chutz La'aretz. Rabbi Schneider likes saying that it's kind of like today. Who makes Aliyah? Like the people who aren't being so successful elsewhere. Like look around, who aren't being so successful elsewhere. So you make Aliyah. People who haven't made in Chutz La'aretz, they don't come. Same thing happened. So, said Sikher Eisman, that's a little bit embarrassing then. Ezra had a job, and he didn't really do it fully. So therefore, said Sikher Eisman, maybe that's why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say explicitly it's Ezra's Yortzeit. It'd be a little bit embarrassing to Ezra. If we said, Ezra had so much potential, and he made it, so great, that's a great thing to say. Ezra had so much potential, and he fell short, that's a little embarrassing. So we allude to it. There's a day of mourning, but we're not going to say what it's about. In other words, according to this approach, the 9th of Teves is a mourning of the loss of, or the fact that there was unactualized potential. That's Ezra Sofer. He had so much potential, could have been the Nosei Torah, not everyone came back. Maybe this as well would help explain what Rav Schoonmaker asked. We're not mourning the death of Ezra, we're mourning over the fact that there's unactualized potential of Ezra. It's not the person of Ezra, it's the potential he had. I think there's a parallel idea that Rav Hirsch has, and others as well, in terms of Tumah. Hirsch has a basic thesis in Sefer Vayikra that all Tumah stems from loss of potential. When a woman gives birth, so she has so much potential within her, and now she doesn't have potential, she's not growing life within her anymore. That creates Tumah. When we cut our fingernails, you've cut off potential. It was growth, now you stopped it. You have to wash your hands. Or what Rashi calls the granddaddy of all Tumahs, dead body. A dead body creates Tumah. Why? Because now there's loss of potential. It's a parallel idea. When there's loss of potential, there's Tumah. There's something to mourn over. So that's the 9th of Teves. I think based on this, we could explain the 8th of Teves and the 10th of Teves. Let's go back to the 8th of Teves, the translation of the Torah into Greek. There is a tshuva from the Radbaz. The Radbaz was asked, why is the Torah not written with punctuation? For the Bali Kriya amongst us, it would be so much easier. You don't have to prepare so much. It's all written right there. So says the Radbaz, because we know, in other contexts, commas save lives, right? Let's eat grandma. Are you familiar with that one? So commas save lives. But the Maila, the greatness of the commas there is, there's only one way to read it. So says the Radbaz, you know why there's no punctuation in the Torah? Because that would limit your understanding of the Torah. You would have one way to read it. Hashem gave us a Torah that is meant to be multifaceted. But we don't want to limit it. We don't want to confine it. So in a similar way, translating the Torah into another language is a limitation on it. It's cutting off the potential of the Torah itself. That's a tremendous amount of darkness then. Right? Hashem uses a language that lends itself to multiple meanings. You translate that into anything else, you've lost those multiple layers of interpretation. That's a tragedy. I think that also might explain the language of the Shulchan Aruch, that darkness descended into the world. If you think about it, let's say you're being very sensitive to your roommate, and you're reading, you have like a flashlight on your phone, whatever, but they're sleeping. So what do? Let's get under the covers. I'll read under the covers, so I'm going to be sensitive. What's the problem? Light escapes. It just gets out under the door, under the blanket, it always gets out. Light represents potential. Light is about growth, about development. What happens? Darkness comes and just smothers it. That's what the Shulchan Aruch is telling us. Darkness came into the world, it smothered the potential. So the 8th of Teves is also about a smothering of potential. Now we come to today, the 10th of Teves. 10th of Teves marks the siege. What's the siege? It's the cutting off. It's cutting off all access until ultimately you have suffocated and destroyed what's inside, destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the 8th and 9th and 10th Teves. It's one theme. The Medrash says that the Beis Hamikdash could have been destroyed on the 10th of Teves. But Hashem had Rachmanis on us and said, it's hard to, I don't want you to go into Golos. It's cold outside, it's raining outside. Let's save it to the summer. That's a summer activity. So aside from communicating the care that Hashem has for us, even though in those moments of destruction, what the Medrash is telling us is that on a fundamental level, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed today. In practice, it was destroyed on Tisha B'Av. But really, the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed today. So, in that sense, today is a more significant day than Tisha B'Av. In the way we observe in the outer facets of the day, Tisha B'Av is more significant, which is why we have more outer trappings of mourning on Tisha B'Av. But on an inner fundamental level, the day itself is a more significant day about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Maybe that would explain what the Abu Dram said. That the day is so powerful, you would even fast on Shabbos. Tisha B'Av, it's an outer trapping. The day itself was not the day that the Beis Hamikdash was fundamentally destroyed. Just in practice it was destroyed on that day. But I'd like to even go a step further. That this idea that we've developed of the culmination, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th of Tevis, and what we're mourning over today, what we're fasting about today, is the antithesis to Shabbos. Shabbos, the Gemara describes as nachala bli mitzarim. It's an inheritance without boundaries. A siege is the exact opposite. It's cutting off potential. Shabbos has endless potential. It's about cutting off. But more than that. Shabbos reminds us about our potential, about the beginning. Ma'aseh Bereishis. This is how it was made, and simultaneously Shabbos is me'ein olam haba, a taste of the future. When you cut off potential, you're cutting off the connection to the past, and you're cutting off everything that's coming forward. That's what's going on the Asara B'Tevis. We're cutting off. That's the antithesis of Shabbos then. So it doesn't make perfect sense then that according to Abu Dram that you would fast on Shabbos, because this is the antithesis of Shabbos. The koach of Asara B'Tevis fights so powerfully against Shabbos. Tisha B'Av is just the day when a building was destroyed. But here it's so much more. So this then is a day of mourning, of contemplation about unactualized potential, when our hopes and our dreams went awry. I think then this adds meaning to what the Rambam said. Remember the Rambam told us? The Rambam told us that these are days of tshuva. Tshuva for us, for what happened earlier. On a basic level, what is tshuva? Tshuva means going back to basics. Coming back to myself. Being the best version of myself. Figuring out, where did I go wrong? I had all this potential to go this way, and I stopped. I got cut short. I went that way instead. So that's exactly what we're talking about today. It's a day of tshuva. It's a day of thinking about where am I coming from, what's my potential, and what's going to be in the future. And that's what each one of us needs to do. We need to think about on our own individual level. What's my potential? Where have I missteps been? How do I get back to where I'm coming from and then end up where I want to go? And if we do that, and we don't just sit around, wait out the clock, so then ultimately we have the potential to be dancing together on Tisha B'Av this year instead of sitting on the floor crying.